Hello, I'm Sawood, the research lead of the Wayback Machine at the Internet Archive. And today I'm going to talk about link rot. How unique is that, right? So the title is Lost but Preserved, a web archiving perspective on the ephemeral web. And we will very quickly figure out what we are trying to say here. So not too long ago, like last year, Pew Research came up with these findings, and they said 38% of the web pages that existed in 2013 are no longer accessible a decade later. Okay. Pew Research being Pew Research, they made a lot of media coverage on this topic. But it's a fascinating research work. It's worth reading. We did realize they did not mention anywhere something called Web Archive, okay, where some of these lost pages might be present, right? So the same year, an SEO company called Ahrefs, they also came up with their own analytics along the same lines. It's called at least 66.5% of links to sites in the last 9 years are dead, okay? Sounds similar. Along the same lines. They also did not mention anything about existence of web archives. In 2021, a fascinating article in The Atlantic from Jonathan Zittrain talked about 25% of about 2 million external deep links from New York Times articles have rotted. They have a lot of interesting findings in this article. It's worth reading, but I've picked out just one. So in 2012, one of our colleagues back at Old Dominion University, named Hani Salahuddin, he was originally from Egypt, and he found out a year after Egyptian revolution, 10% of this social media documentation is gone. That's an insane rate of decay, right? Then more recently, Old Dominion University, in collaboration with the Internet Archive and Filecoin Foundation, they did an extensive longitudinal study on link rot based on Wayback Machine datasets. And one of the many findings, only 35% of web pages sampled from a span of 25 years were still alive in 2023. Okay, so this is basically 25, 26 years worth of data. The story is no better in the scholarly web. 1 in 5 scholarly articles suffers from reference rot. And we can go on and on, right? Brewster Kahle, the founder of the Internet Archive, he has been citing numbers like 40 days, 75 days, or 100 days of average lifespan of a web page. Over time, he has been changing these numbers. So then let's look at the Web Archive side. Like, okay, we have Web Archives that exist. They archive the web. And there have been a few researchers, and they found out like not all web is archived equal, okay? So the percentage of the web, say, of the English American web, the percentage of archiving activity on that one is not necessarily the same on the Danish web or Arabic web or you name it, right? Also, it depends how you sample your URLs to check their archiving percentage. It also affects greatly like what number you will come up with. Before we move forward, let's go through a few keywords that we'll be using. Alive, dead, preserved, rescued, endangered, vanished, archived, accessible. We'll see some visual explanation of that very quickly. So going back to Pew Research, okay? One of the headlines they made was 38% of the links from 2013 are dead. So basically, they looked at yearly data samples and like what percentage is lost from those years. Of course, the most recent years, their loss is not that much, but for the headline, they picked the earliest year, 2013, and the loss at that time was 38%. So we thought, how much of these that are otherwise gone from the live web, they are present in the Wayback Machine? And by the way, this data set was collected from Common Crawl, and this is about 1 million URLs. And they have looked at many different types of URLs, like the news-related stuff and the general web and Wikipedia-related URLs, gov domains. So this is one of those slices that they represented in this graph. So when we looked in the Wayback Machine, we found we got a significant number of those in the Wayback Machine. So maybe it's not all is not gone, right? In the last 3 years, we have like 100% of their samples that they thought was lost is covered. But this is a lie. What happened is like we started ingesting Common Crawl data into Wayback Machine, going backward. So last 3 years, we already had that data, and the source that they sampled from, we already got that source into Wayback Machine. So don't look at last 3 years, okay? Yeah. Now, as I talked about, this was their look at the general web sample of 1 million URLs. So where they were saying 38% of those are gone from 10 years. What we found is like, but 38% of those gone ones are something that are preserved. So it comes down to something like 16% or something of the total that we have preserved, okay? Now look at their entire data set that they looked at, and that was total was about 5.4 million URLs from different categories. And in that case, they were like about a quarter was gone. So the headline in that case would be like every 1 in 4 URLs is dead, basically, if you look at their sample. But when we put the web archive in perspective, what we found is like a lot is still available, right? So that's the preserved part, which is the URLs that are still alive and how many of those are in an archive as well. And there are URLs that are otherwise dead on the live page, live site. How many of those are present in an archive? We call them rescued, okay? So the stuff that would otherwise not be accessible, right? By the way, this is the slide. If you are live blogging or making notes, this is the one that you want to take pictures of. There is no fancier slide than this one, okay? Yeah. Yeah, so then there is the part of the web that is still alive, but we don't have in the Wayback Machine, and we are calling them endangered. Okay, we don't preserve them, then they eventually will be gone, right? And this 10% slice is the stuff that is not alive anymore, and it's not in the Wayback Machine. So the stuff that was like about a quarter was dead. Now we are saying only 10% is not accessible. And talking about the keywords, so if you combine the top 2, we are calling them archived, and if you combine top 3, we call them accessible. May or may not be archived, like so, because this portion is still online, and the other things are either online or preserved, basically. So now we are talking about the last 2. Sorry, how to go back? There. Now we'll be talking more about these 2 pieces, right? The vanished and the endangered ones, okay? So how to deal with the vanished one? Do we forget about them? Like, okay, it's not alive, it's not in any archives, so what can do about it? Well, there have been a recent tool called Fable, and what it does, it looks at the search engine queries and redirection patterns in historical captures and the URI change patterns and stuff like that. So what they try to find is like, if the same content is rehosted somewhere else or moved to another location, so there is an opportunity for us to locate those pieces and kind of cover some of the 10% that we think is kind of vanished, right? This is not a research in isolation. There have been, this topic was researched in the past as well. Martin Klein's from ODU, his PhD dissertation was on this topic. There have been other researchers who looked at it, but this is one of the more recent ones. Another thing we can do is, okay, if something is not present in the Wayback Machine, maybe some of those pieces are present in other web archives and exist a few of those, right? And, the IIPC audience knows them. So I put together a tool called MemGator a while ago. And if you run that, like in si.edu domain, you find like there are multiple copies in many different archives. So if the web archive, internet archive is not there, or if certain URLs are not present in that one, maybe there are a few copies in other archives, and maybe that will help us reduce the 10% even further down and slim it down, right? So moving on to the endangered one, the stuff that is alive but is not preserved anywhere, right? In an archive. So it's basically the challenges that we have in there, like resource constraints, like how many machines you have available, how much network bandwidth is available, how much you can archive in, on a given day, the storage and whatnot. And the pages might be JavaScript heavy, so traditional tools will not work. You'll have to have a browser-based crawlers, and some activity needs to happen that slows down the process. There is bot blocking. It's a very annoying problem nowadays, even more so as the AI companies are kind of hunting for data all over the place, and it kind of hurts us as well. Login walls, paywalls, deep web, rate limiting, timely discovery, like, I mean, the URL existed, but we could not find about it, so we cannot archive it, right? Geo-targeting. If every crawling is happening in one place, say on the west coast of the US, how the same page looks like in Europe or India or other parts of the world, we would not know that, right? So there's a need to do something about that as well, right? Wayback Machine, we have many different sources of URL discovery and collections and archiving. It's not an exhaustive list, but a few of these. So archive team is kind of a decentralized means of archiving, so it kind of brings some of the diversity, like a geolocation diversity in this stuff. We archive things like from GDELT or Media Cloud. They give us like daily list of URLs that are published on global media, and we try to archive those. Safe Page Now, people like you can ask us to archive something, and we'll do that. So there are many different sources that we keep an eye on. Archive.it is like a subscription service that we have where curators from many different organizations archive stuff, right? Common crawl data is something that we are ingesting. Wikipedia, links on Wikipedia are something that we are actively archiving. We'll talk more about it. So we have something called IABot, or Internet Archive Bot, that runs on these wikis in many different languages and checks for the pages that have broken links in there. And if the link is really broken, we try to find a copy in the Wayback Machine, and if there is one, we try to replace that link, so we fix that way. Initially, when we started this process, at that time, we had about 9 million broken links were fixed at that time in one go. But at that time, we had a lot of URLs that we did not have any copies in the Wayback Machine. So now we are kind of doing an insurance policy in a sense. Basically, each time a URL is added to any Wikipedia page, we get a notification of that using their event stream API, and we try to archive it immediately, okay? So that in the future, when the link breaks, we have a copy in the Wayback Machine. So we are operating on that, and as we speak, we have 23 million broken links fixed so far and counting, okay? So what's the status in the Wikipedia links? Like how many of those are like dead and rescued and all that, right? And I came up with this number really quickly. So 2/3 of the dead links on Wikipedia are rescued. Please do not quote me on this one. This is unreliable number. And the reason I mentioned it here because it's a cool slide. I put together a tool, like everyone is talking about LLMs and AI, right? So of course, why not use that? So I asked, like in a natural language, I asked a question like how many links are dead and rescued and all that, right? It generated an SQL query for me that I can run against the database of this AI bot thing, and run against it, and I got these numbers. So I just wanted to show that off here, okay? Now, the reason why this number is unreliable, I want to tell you that, basically. Because when the links on Wikipedia go out of favor, for example, they are part of the historical versions of a page, they are not in the forefront, our bot is not checking their status actively because it's kind of wasteful. So when it checked last time, maybe 2 years, 3 years, whatever time ago, at that time for live, and the link is not cited anywhere on the current version of Wikipedia, then it will not check its status. So even if the link is dead, we don't know about that, right? We continue to count as live. The same goes the other way as well. Another source of unreliability comes from the fact that some of these URLs are there is bot blocking or some other paywalls and stuff like that that we don't have access to, and we don't want to make a judgment on that. So the New York Times article, we tried to look into that and see some assessment on that. We could not have access to their data set, the 2 million URL set that they had. So we tried to recreate it ourselves, basically. And what we did is basically we went to the Wayback Machine and said, give us all the New York Times articles from 2013. We grabbed those, extracted links from there, like the external links only. We got about 88,000 URLs, not 2 million. And then we checked the live status of those, and 40% of those were dead, okay? Then we checked how many of those are present in the Wayback Machine, and we found 38% were present in the Wayback Machine, so it was almost all was preserved. Now, this doesn't tell the true story of the, because the original one had like 2 million URLs that we could not have access to, and we collected articles only for 1 year, not the span of 10 years or something that they did, and also our results are biased towards the stuff that is already in the Wayback Machine, so it's kind of there is an impact of that as well. So before I conclude, a bunch of people that I wanted to acknowledge, Aaron Smith and their team at the Pew Research, they shared their data set with us and the methodology. They even come on a video call to talk about it when we said we want to look at it from the archival perspective. Rachel, one of our interns at the Internet Archive, she did some catalogs of the related works that mentioned in here. Jake, one of our colleagues at the Internet Archive, he helped with the recreation of the New York Times data set that we talked about. So to conclude, while we found that all these link rot related studies, the ones that I mentioned here and many more that are out there that are beyond the scope of this 20-minute presentation, they all agree that this link, the web is rotting and that the links are broken increasingly. Some of them acknowledge existence of the web archive, some don't. What we learned is like, we need to do a better job of it, right? And yes, a better job of telling people that we exist, and also better job of shrinking the endangered web, basically, right? So what we found in the Pew Research, they're all data set, that was basically 26% was dead, but with the help of Wayback Machine, 16% was rescued. Their general web, 27% was dead, and 13% was rescued. From Zitron's article, like 40% was dead, and 38% was rescued, so it was really good. The Old Dominion University study, the longitudinal one, they found 65% dead, and we have it all because they sampled from the Wayback Machine itself. So we didn't do much there, right? With that, I'll take any questions, actually, on overboard a little bit.